information with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Aaron Page.
All interviews presented on the Remedy Revolution podcast are designed to provide information and inspiration only. Guests of the podcast may present opinions and anecdotes which are solely their own. And as always, before beginning any treatment protocol, please consult with your preferred medical provider. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin. Hey, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to you all listeners. I am so appreciative of all of your support. If you could please like, share, subscribe, go to the Instagram at Remedy Revolution Podcast. This is literally the only ask that I will ever ask of you. It does not cost you a thing. Please share, get the word out. We are being censored pretty regularly. I've been struck from YouTube and a number of other places. So please, please, please do your part. Share the information. If you find value, I'm sure your friends and family will as well. So today's guest is somebody who actually approached me, and I'm very excited to introduce you to him. He is working in the space of energetic medicine, scalar frequencies, which is very interesting to me for those of you who have ever done any kind of kinesiology or muscle testing or any of those types of modalities. He is utilizing something similar, and I'm excited to talk to him. Thank you for coming on the show, Pierre Andre. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you for hosting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into what it is that you're doing, how did you come to this space? I find that the vast majority of us are really thrust into this position of having to heal either ourselves or our family members before we sort of make that journey. So what was that journey like for you?
Well, I used to eat many years ago. I ate the standard American diet. Never really thought of how the various daily choices I make was impacting my health until my dad, he was diabetic. His blood sugar was like 230, something ridiculous. We had to call the ER. And the doctor scared the daylights out of me when I was just like, again, I had zero knowledge about anything really health related in terms of like how sugar can impact your health, things like that. So when I said to the doctor, look, I don't want to become diabetic. What do I do? And the doctor was just like, you're going to become diabetic too. That was just sort of the flippant answer. And I'm just like, well, that doesn't really sound right in my heart. And so I started just doing a lot of reading and studying on my own. And that's how I started figuring certain things out. I watched many, many documentaries. Read a lot of books, and one of the pivotal things was one of the first health articles I read was from, I'm sure many people have heard of him, the Health Ranger, Mike Adams. And it was an old article about sugar and microwaves and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's all false, what he's saying. Like, if I cut sugar, nothing is going to happen. Sugar is fine. Microwaves are fine. But I said, you know what, let me put it to the test, because I was saying no just purely as an ego response. I'm like, well, if what he's saying is truly false, let me go ahead and cut sugar. Let me study microwaves more. Let me do these things. And I kept getting results. And I said, okay, understood. I really need to look carefully at things and use what we like to call as discernment. If everything is above board that's being discussed with you, you should be able to investigate for yourself and make decisions. And so it started like that. I was an investigator. Fast forward, my mom was on various medications, and they almost killed her actually with aspirin. And that's part of why I'm so passionate about this work. I'm not into debating anyone about my stance and I wouldn't even call it my stance based on the evidence. I don't debate people on my stance around what big pharma is, which is a scam. With exception, I always say, unless you have like a broken ankle or a serious acute injury, then we have some of the best care out there to patch you up. But everything else that they present is a scam, because if it slightly works, it's already been stolen from something in nature anyway, added with poisons. And so helping her recover was one of the pivotal moments for me. And, I always mention my teacher, the quantum physicist, Dan Nelson, who passed away, and he taught me the scalar stuff. I continue to work with his technology and I've added on certain things. And that's how, fast forward, I was able to get my mom off all her medication using the scalar frequencies and lots of high quality nutrition. And then so now I used to work in schools, and fast forward, here I am. I'm doing this as my full time work and really enjoying it.
Absolutely. So, with the background working in the school system, I know we talked a little bit offline about that, but what were you seeing happening with the youth of today, particularly when it comes to health and nutrition and all of those kinds of things?
Oh yeah, quick true story. So the role I used to work with children was in counseling, and I always let people know my children and parents that self-medicated were in better shape. They still had their struggles versus all of the children who followed the psychiatrist's instructions. So I'm a firm believer, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with talk therapy, but these medications are terrible. And I got to see it in real time over many, many years. There was never a case I could think of when I would compare my caseload. Okay, I got client A following all directions on two, three, four psychotropics. They're a disaster. They have to get hospitalized once a month. Client B only does talk therapy and no drugs, or sometimes likes to self-medicate with marijuana or other things that I would try to discourage them from using, and they're maintaining a lot better. And I said, this can't be possible. If what you're saying, this is the gold standard, why are these people who do what you say to do sicker? And so I got to see that over the years, and that frustrated me. And as I was learning, I had a company that I still work with them to this day, willing to donate hundreds of dollars worth of nutritional. Purely, it was all plant-based, clean stuff people could go buy in the grocery store, but it would cost you like $300-400 if you bought each individual ingredient. So at the high school I used to work at, thankfully it was accepted, and I was able to donate this to some of the children, and they saw a massive difference in their mental health, their physical health. But fast forward, when I was here in Texas at an ISD, they brought up tons of red tape saying I could not donate this. I brought the product to them. I brought the product sheet. I'm like, there's nothing here that isn't consumable to the human diet, and they really wasn't interested. So that was quite eye opening. Meanwhile, these kids were drugged up, being violent daily, and it was just sad. So I mean, I have, besides what's in the literature, I have real world experience. That's why it's like, no, I got to see it with my own eyes. This is a scam. They're scamming you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a lot on the podcast about the fact that, we've got kids that are perhaps, on a lower socioeconomic level who are, surviving on school lunches and things like that. And the types of ingredients that they're putting in those lunches are horrific. I mean, they're giving them, packaged chicken nuggets and burritos and things like that that have all kinds of preservatives and horrible things for their diet, for their nutrition. But then that plays a role in their mental health as well, because we can't part and parcel out the human body. The mental emotional health is just as important as the physical health, and they all are intertwined. So tell me a little bit about what it is that you're doing now and who you're working with.
Well, before I do that quickly, I want to give you a real life example. In my final year at several of the schools I worked in, there would be donations. And this is the same thing that happened again. This was a different ISD. And so you'd have Captain Crunch, a lot of these popular brands of these crappy cereals donated
Yeah.
because it was to help close nutritional gaps for families over the weekend who didn't have enough to eat. But it was basically totally processed, boxed up stuff, high sugar, artificial colors, and things like that. And that was one of the pivotal moments that, again, really reinforced for me I have to leave, because clearly this is not what I should be doing. I realize in having a license, getting a traditional license under the state is so that they can control you and take it away. And that's why I was glad to give it up. Because legally, one of the workarounds, if I ever found the family interested and they had to demonstrate interest, I would always say, hey, so I have a colleague who mentioned, like I'd mentioned the website Mad in America, Dr. Robert Whitaker, great
Hmm.
chronicling of what's going on in the psychotropic industry. And I
Right.
passed that along to hopefully send a family on their journey. But literally, I had to risk my license for that. So yeah, it's quite sad. And the last thing I'll say too with that topic, the school lunches are provided by the same companies that they contract with for prisons. That's why it's so crappy. It's a
Yeah.
joke. They're getting
Yeah.
food like stuff. Um,
Absolutely.
but in terms of who I work with, I'm very passionate nowadays. I'm listed with React 19 as a practitioner, well versed in helping people recover from what I deem the medical decision, aka the COVID shot. My niece was bullied into it, and I helped her recover, and that's part of what inspired me. I helped her. I had another client that I worked with for several years that I warned beforehand, hey, don't, at least wait if you're considering this. I'm not going to touch it, but this is what I think you should do. At least wait. And of course, she didn't, and she was hurt too. And there's a spectrum. My niece almost bled to death. This client, what I find universally, all of the COVID shots, if you get a real dose, creates massive amounts of oxidative stress. There's pathogens and all sorts of metals and things in them. And it just depends on your health state. And so with this client, got her cleaned up and she recovered. And I was gonna sort of keep quiet and just move along. But then I saw opportunity too, being that I wanted to leave schools. It's just like, I felt like God spoke to me like the reason why you know how to do this with no medical training is you should be doing this. You don't necessarily, it's like a person who's well versed in music, you could go to music school, or if you are truly a musician, you can play music. And
Right.
so that's how I always describe myself. Like I'm one of those people who can sit down and play. And so I do a lot of that, and I get referrals around that, and I just do general coaching with people, helping people transition off medications. I have a current client. She was told by her psychiatrist after 20 years on psychotropics she could never get off, and so we're starting that journey. And it's been tough, but she hasn't known how her body works. She didn't know how to feed her brain and things like that. So I sit and I map those things out with people. I create customized protocols using the very best products I can find, and then people tend to get better.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned something that I didn't want to gloss over. So you said if you got a real dose. What in your mind is going on with all of that? Because clearly we've seen people who have suffered tremendously. I've seen that. I'm also a practitioner with React 19, so I've seen that, with many, many patients. However, there are others that it doesn't seem to affect. So in your opinion, why is that?
Oh yeah, if there's a site I think is like how bad is my batch? And that was one of the ways I think I naturally had an inkling that everybody couldn't be getting a real dose. Because if my niece got the poison and bled out, or people have gotten it, and I've seen video where people die within hours, other people take it and nothing happens. It's like logically you can't, whatever's in that vial, you didn't give it to this person
Right.
because here we have two adults and people are dying or having these immediate reactions and other people don't. And so with the how bad is my batch, they were able to track some of the worst lots, the strongest doses, and that's how I knew. And especially, I'll give you an example within the NFL for people who like sports. I knew right away, logically, they had a protocol where to push it along the public because a lot of people worship sports and athletes. They were doing the quote vaccinating in their facility. Knowing the level that these men put their hearts under the stress, there's no way had any of those guys got real doses in those facilities, we would not have seen players dying on the field. So it was obvious. It was more so to train the public,
Hmm.
because here's another concentration. If all these guys got real doses, any of them, we would have seen players passing away. The few players that had to retire due to blood clots, I studied the stories, all of them went off site and took shots. And then, too, there were players who got busted. with fake vaccination cards, which should tell you something, but it's crystal clear. I think logically, if you follow it, there's just no way we can have this sort of variation where, some people, nothing is happening and other people immediately get sick. Or I think what's worse is there's those people in the middle where they think they're fine, blood clots and things are building up, and then these are the people who are dying suddenly. So that's why
Right.
I've concluded no, there's a spectrum. All of the top quote politicians, if they are still useful to the powers that shouldn't be, they get saline. But we're seeing a lot of Hollywood people. There's pages that I track. They're tracking people are passing away, just dropping dead all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in the insurance industry, they're tracking excess
Yes,
mortality in a major way. And they're talking about like I don't know what the terminology is, but it's something like a 4 sigma event, which is like completely unprecedented with the absence of like some crazy natural disaster or something that wipes out, thousands of people. So yeah, so absolutely. I'm definitely of the mind that I think that there is something going on. There's other speculation talking about the chance of those particular vials being corrupted primarily because they were not kept under optimal conditions, which needed to happen. They had to be like at a certain very low temperature, for example, in order to be utilized, and perhaps they weren't handled properly. And maybe that's, part of what's going on as well. But certainly there's a huge scale of, these horrible, horrific, and even immediate reactions versus, people who have had zero reaction at all. So I've seen that as well.
are you aware of the Brooke Jackson case? People should look into that. I think they appealed it, but they struck her down. She provided photo evidence, I think even video evidence, emails, and she was someone who was hired to study the trials.
Hmm.
This is what she does. People were being unblinded.
Right.
People were being sent home, having immediate injuries. This is in the trial phase. So, like when you look at a case, the only logical conclusion, if you want to be honest with yourself, is that this was deliberate. It wasn't about science. It wasn't about your health. They had an agenda. They were going to get these things into people's bodies.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to look any further than, for example, the case of Maddie Gary, who is a young girl, about 13 or 14 years old, who took the vaccines and suffered tremendous injuries. She's in a wheelchair, she's on a feeding tube, and she suffered so much that her mother, well, the crazy part is that she was actually involved in the clinical trials. And I believe it was Pfizer had reported that she had a stomach ache. So that was what was reported in the clinical trials. And we're talking about someone who is extremely impacted with, quality of life in a tremendous way. And it's criminal what has been going on. Particularly, this was a girl who thought that she was doing her part, thought that she was doing something good for the world. And, it's unfortunate that the reality came crashing down on that family in particular. Okay, so let's just talk about, I want to take a step back and talk about what it is that you're using for energetic testing. So there's lots of different modalities that people utilize, applied kinesiology. That's if for those of you listening who are unfamiliar, where, for example, you might put your arm out and a naturopath or other practitioner would test your resistance to a particular supplement or whatever it might be. And then, there's, of course, all kinds of other pendulum testing. There's things like, intuitive testing as well. So what is the process like working with you, and what are you analyzing?
Yeah, often, and I call myself a biofield tester because what I discovered from working with my teacher and studying this even further is the human body records all of its issues within the energy field. And so there's many things, even though we can't see it with the naked eye, by testing for what we call resonance, and like you said, the strong or the weak, that's how we can establish what's going on with a particular person. And so, for example, I have a chart here. This has cortisol. And so there's just three categories. If a person's cortisol is too low, green just right, red is too high. Most people, when I test them and I'm working with them, they always scale that their cortisol is too high. You could check for a person's blood sugar. I check for oxidative stress and these different things. And it's all about getting yes and no answers and scaling it in terms of a scale of 0 to 100. Things that are very good, you want as closest to 100. Things that aren't so good, you want as low. Like, so systemic inflammation, you'd want a person to scale at, say, a 5, a 7, or 11, versus most people. And, here I have these shots here. When I was analyzing them, they create massive amounts of oxidative stress, massive amounts of systemic inflammation. And the beauty, once you're able to pull that data from the energy field itself, because it's well established, Dr. Fritz Popp, we are living biophotons. We are light. There's a luminescence coming off our body. There's a doctor in Russia, it begins with a K. He has a special camera where they can gas discharge visualization. That's what the camera is called, where they can scan your energy field, and based on how much light is coming off your energy field, that's indicative of health. The less light, the sicker you'll tend to be, and then there'll be holes in the energy field. So there's this whole world. What makes up our 3D world is actually governed by the energy realm. I always say, like, we're on a computer right now. The software, the programming is what controls the hardware. So if you ever have a hardware physical issue, you need to look at the software. And being that the energy is more sensitive than blood, I have testimonials, for example, on my website where I analyzed the woman before she had her blood work done. And I have like vials. So I'll have a picture of someone, just say, right, I want to know what such and such's priority issues are. And that's why I say I could just do a picture of the hand, because it doesn't matter. I could do the face. As long as I have a piece of your body that I can see, everything is encoded and recorded there. And so, like, this person had high C-reactive protein. Fast forward, she goes and gets a formal exam. They find C-reactive protein levels are high in the body. And I believe because, one, I believe in a creator, I believe in God. He wanted us to have a way. This is ancient. Like, this is actually the standard of how people used to do things. And a lot of people are coming back to this because we have to have a vehicle to be able to stay away from big pharma and resolve our issues. So this whole process is literally how I've had success with several clients, detoxifying them from the COVID shot. I got a client, she was about to be put on 4 different medications to quiet her stomach pain. True story. I put her on high dose of ginger. I have and the quality of the products matter as well. And I assess products the same way I assess people to find the companies who make the best stuff. And she did high doses of ginger. Ginger has been keeping her out of the hospital. And she's totally committed now. Like, wait a minute, I can manage my symptoms with ginger. The 4 medications you presented me were going to cause infertility or cancer as a side effect. And so this is what I mean. The human body knows its remedies. Now, fast forward, we're doing a couple other things with clay, but we're going to be able to get her gut to heal, because the body not only says what its problems is. The next question is, okay, I always ask people, what do you need to address as many health issues as possible? How do we get your mitochondria producing more ATP?
Mm-hmm.
The body already knows its remedies. So I'll have like 60 different substances. I got supplements, I got different things. And then that's how I can customize and craft what is it a person needs. And so that's how, like, the ginger, I was able to land on it for her because I tested various things that are really good for the gut. And her body said, well, if you give me high doses of that, that will really help with the stomach stuff. And keep in mind, the other medication she was on, I pulled and showed her the documentation. All of her symptoms were being created by the medication. So the poisoning had stopped working in terms of stopping the stomach pain. And now she was just getting all the, quote, side effects, the things that she didn't want to happen. And their solution was going to be several more medications. Keep in mind that they're quite pissed because she has really good insurance, and this was thousands and thousands of dollars that she was
Yeah.
going to be spending. And we're resolving the issue and keeping it quarantined, per se, with about a $15 bottle of organic ginger.
Yeah, absolutely. So you bring up something that I mention a lot, and that is, oftentimes when I have patients who come to me on multiple medications, sometimes I don't know what are symptoms and what are side effects. And I think that's a really important distinction that a lot of people don't really understand to their core. They think that a medication is helping them because it's suppressing symptoms, but it might then uproot other symptoms or other problems throughout the system, because like I said earlier, we can't, what's happening in my finger is also happening in my heart, so all of those things are connected. And, I think that's part of, as you said, the scam of the pharmaceutical industry is that it doesn't look at the body as a holistic being. It looks at, each individual symptom or each individual part, even the specializations, right? But you mentioned something I wanted to talk a little bit more about, and that was about mitochondria and ATP production, which, as we know, for people who have chronic illness, which is a lot of people that I speak with, can be impaired, particularly if you've got an autoimmune condition or something that's been going on for a very long period of time. Suddenly you find yourself in this state of mitochondrial dysfunction. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, as well as how mitochondrial function and ATP, adrenal health, and all of that plays a role when we think of stress and our emotional health.
Oh,
It's a big
yeah.
question.
Um, Before I tackle that real quick, anyone on more than one medication, you are engaged in polypharmacy. The classical definition, they say, is five or more. That's false. Everything gets approved in isolation. So if you're on a daily Advil plus an SSRI, that is polypharmacy. It was never studied what happens if you're on the SSRI and the Advil or blood pressure medication. And this is why it's inevitable we get these effects. The mechanism of action of all these medications, for the most part, with rare exception, is there are poisoning of the mitochondria and forcing the body to do something that it already knows how to do while stealing vitamins and minerals out of the body. So it's impossible to be on these things and not have new issues be created. So amazing big business model by Big Pharma. But now to answer that question, the interesting thing is part of why most women, the vast majority of cases that's documented with autoimmunity is tied to women. And this is something that I teach in my sessions is the right eye represents the sympathetic nervous system, left eye is parasympathetic. Most men almost exclusively are parasympathetic. Most women are sympathetic dominant, which is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. And so women tend to not be able to deal with stress based on their nervous systems being more dominant in one direction than another. And now, when we talk about traumatic experiences, which get recorded in the body, just like I could test a person's hand and find, for example, most people are always shocked when I test them, they'll tend to have Hep B in their liver. You know how they got Hep B in their liver? Because they took the Hep B shot. So whenever they're giving us these shots, they're giving you what they're telling you they're protecting you from. So the emotions as well, traumatic experiences. I'm sure most people have heard of Bradley Nelson's system, the emotion code. And so I use scalar energy to remove these things, but you can literally test a person's body, and I always just go based on priority because the body's like an onion. What are the priority emotions and where are they stored that's impacting biological function? Really downright. And that's the key question I ask because the quality of the question you ask will impact the sort of results you can get. So you go for the priority, not the low hanging fruit. And I tend to find most women will have emotional stuff stuck in the thyroid, stuck in the adrenals. Women, if they tend to test as having something stuck in the sexual organs that is indicative of abuse, that's how you get autoimmune. When somebody, if they are violated in that manner, or you experience enough trauma, Plus, with the pathogens, right? Then you got biofilm. They hide behind biofilm. The human body is not attacking itself, it is trying to get these things out. The fallout is you experience, quote, autoimmunity, but your body's trying to keep you alive. There are things that are there, whether it's physical, like some sort of bacteria hidden behind biofilm, Lyme hiding behind biofilm. By the way, Lyme can be passed on. You don't have to be bitten by the tick. A lot of people don't know this, through partners, through people getting together in a sexual manner. So that's one of the main ways a lot of people are getting Lyme and don't know it. But with the autoimmune, so when you have high cortisol day to day, right? You've experienced these various traumas that are impacting biology. They'll literally be squeezing and stealing energy out of your mitochondria. So even if you're eating the appropriate diet, you're supplementing appropriately, if the issue is emotional slash energetic in nature, the body declares that. And that's why we have to get rid of it. Speaking of which, I could show you, for those of you who see on video, I always test someone, right? I have 5 categories here. And even people always come to me with physical issues. I'll say, where's the priority area the body wants help? It'll tend to always be emotional, because for the physical stuff, the body knows what to do with heavy metals, try to keep it away from the vital organs. But the emotional things, the body doesn't, it needs assistance, because these are like recorded energetic tattoos almost that's attached themselves to various organs and glands. And if we don't move those things along, the very best supplementation and things like that won't necessarily work. I even test people for how well they are absorbing and assimilating their vitamins and minerals, because you could go to someone, be on the perfect protocol, but if absorption is an issue, you will not get the results. So then an absorption will tend to be an issue because of emotional stuff. So it must be addressed. Unfortunately, the body lets it be known where the issue is. And so when we're talking thyroid, and a lot of women who have, quote, autoimmune and thyroid issues, I find often it's the adrenals. You
Mhm.
ask the person's body, the thyroid says, I always ask, are you being stolen from? The body will say, yes. Who's stealing from you? The adrenals, to keep you alive, because the adrenals are so taxed. And then, so the person's remedy will be, well, I ask, if we feed your adrenals and support your adrenals, will you stop stealing from the thyroid? Yes. Does the thyroid need direct support? No. So the human body knows, and it's so sensitive. And with this autoimmune thing, I think this sort of work, we're the ones who could really help people with autoimmune versus with standard blood tests. For example, when you get your blood panel run, it's going to show you have a thyroid issue. Meanwhile, because of those markers, meanwhile, the real issue is actually the adrenals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so often, even panels that they have these, quote unquote, levels, optimal levels, but those aren't necessarily optimal. They're common, but that doesn't mean that they're optimal for that particular person. They don't
Right.
take into account the variations of human beings on this planet. They don't take into account that 100-pound woman is probably a little bit different than a 300-pound man when it comes to blood pressure. And that's just the way it is. So, I think that's hugely important, but you bring up such an amazing point, which is, I've studied and worked with emotion code, for example, and looking at all of these symptoms and understanding that the body does remember all of these things. Your emotions, we know that they affect you in the short term, but they also, live in your tissues, in your body. Your body recognizes and remembers those things. It's the same concept, like, for example, when you smell something that takes you back to a very particular memory that, you can remember that smell of, whatever it is. Let's say it's grandma's cooking, right? That smell will bring you back into that situation and scenario and make you feel the same feelings that you were feeling when you originally smelled that. So really interesting. And if for any of you who have not experienced or read the emotion code, I think it's an amazing book. And it can be really helpful in understanding kind of the underlying or the underpinnings of so much of disease, and particularly in autoimmunity. autoimmunity, because people who think that they're really struggling with autoimmunity, there's likely an emotional component. I would say at least 99.9% of my patients particularly are really experiencing a lot of emotional traumas in the physical realm. So I love what you said there.
By the way, there's two films done for Motion Code. It's E-Motion and I think E-Motion Part Two. And
Awesome.
Bradley Nelson is featured in both of them. And one quick thing I forgot to mention, with what I've done, I've expanded on his system because you can test people hold on to emotions at times, even in their bones, and that needs to be cleared. You can hold it in your teeth, along the teeth, the bones, and then along the cell wall. So for those who are practitioners listening to this, you can test people for that because that might be where the priority thing is. Our cell walls will resonate with a dominant negative emotion if we've experienced enough trauma or from one traumatic experience, and that impacts assimilation and utilization of the nutrients. Because if the cell is unhappy, just like the organs can be unhappy, it will be resistant to letting the appropriate vitamins and minerals into the body. And it has nothing to do with the person consuming the thing that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So also, I know that there are certain barriers, physical barriers, for a lot of people when it comes to healing. And you mentioned one of those things earlier in our communication prior about electromagnetic frequencies or EMFs. So I see a lot of that, as well as people who are unknowingly living or working in moldy homes or moldy buildings, things like that, that then start to impact somebody's health, and they don't realize it because they're constantly in that environment. So talk to me a little bit about how EMFs play a role in as an obstacle to healing and health.
Well, ever since they've rolled out, as my teacher taught me many years ago, the 60 hertz cycle, that's one of the key things. And 60 hertz cycle is what our standard electricity runs on. That's one of the key things that helps to create cancer because it's an ongoing stressor to us. Fast forward, now we have Wi-Fi and 5G. There's a great book, Dr. Sam Milham, Dirty Electricity. People can check that out. He's chronicled the diseases of civilization once electricity is introduced. That's why the Amish cancer rate continues to stay stagnant because they don't use much electricity. And of course, they don't take any shots. But with what we're talking about electricity, the electromagnetics is, think of the bald frog syndrome. We're in a slow cooker. And so it is creating massive amounts of oxidative stress depending on the people. Now, some people, like children, because they're in better shape, it's less of an issue. And I always let people know you got two options. Either you get something that's effective that will strengthen you and offset what this is doing to you, the non-ionizing radiation, or you consume things like real vitamin C, microdose of melatonin. Key antioxidants can go in the body and pull the radiation out. When I assess people, I always test them, always find their radiation levels the cells is holding on to in the 70s. And so it destroys DNA. It also opens up the calcium ion channel to let more poisons in. And so fast forward with COVID, part of what's happened, and I saved it. I don't know if it's still up on the internet. There's a medical journal that cited radio frequency as tied to COVID-19. It's tied to loss of smell and taste. When you lose smell and taste, you lose your zinc. You're dealing with oxidative stress. So once they turned up these technologies, by the way, has anybody noticed our cell phones haven't gotten any faster? The electromagnetics like 5G, these were classified as weapon systems. Please look up everything that I'm saying. So they've rolled out a weapon system here and they've told us that it's this really cool technology to help us. And at this point, unless you're able to live off grid in isolation from this, massive amounts of antioxidants and or, like I said, the protective frequency devices. I produce one myself. The one other option people have, I believe it's in Virginia. There's a town, and it's very hard to get, but you can formally be classified as for a disability being electrosensitive. They're going to make you fight tooth and nail for it. But some people, that's their key health issue. But the
Mhm.
body will declare it. And this is what I mean energetically. Standard blood tests, standard medical exams. If your issue is that you're super sensitive to electromagnetics, your standard doctor, you can spend as much money as you want. You'll never get down to the root cause. So the EMFs are a huge, huge issue. I think it basically sets us up to be always in a state of stress, of having oxidative stress. And that's why it's a foundational pillar when working with people. I always remind them. And that's part of whenever I develop protocols for people, they're taking lots more antioxidants of what the body says that it needs, not just to deal with the EMS, but also too, just for its day-to-day functions. So everybody is behind the eight ball and don't even know it. That's why the health of the children now, we're seeing the children just a lot more sicker, because the human body is struggling to keep up with all of the assaults.
Yeah, so just as an everyday person who maybe is not experiencing a ton of symptoms, what might they do to combat some of the EMF assaults that they are receiving on a daily basis?
Or at a minimum, turn your Wi-Fi off at night, because that's where you're having the strongest signal. Use wired headphones. Use speakerphone with your phone. Try to tend not to wear it in your pocket. Now, there's protective things, there's diodes, there's different things you can put on the phone, but assuming a person doesn't have something effective to remediate that, you would really, really want to be careful. Be it your smart meter, for example, if you can locate it, if you live in a house, if it's up against a wall, like near a bedroom, move your bed. Move your bed to the other side of the room, because the smart meter, again, it pumps out lots and lots of dirty electricity, because the alternating current is what's the big issue. Direct current is steady, right? But alternating current, those spikes is what helps create stress for us. Our bodies are very electrical, people. Like, your cells communicate via electricity. And so these things are disruptive to that whole process. So unplug your Wi-Fi at night, move your bed if you need to. Yeah, and try to keep the phones if you're using things that aren't, because you could also too get everything hardwired. That's an option within your home. But still at night, you're going to want to unplug, because unfortunately, most of us live in close enough proximity to others. If you can use your phone and pull up that person's EMF signal, it's penetrating your home. Those waves will penetrate your body. So, it's not as intense as what's in your house, but that's where what's in your house is going to be the most intense signal. So unplug that. And lastly, I'd say too, if you're someone who lives near a home, near a power plant, if you can see the electrical substation, you might want to try to be able to move, or you need
Yeah.
to get your home remediated. You're getting a strong dose, a really strong dose, the closer you are to electrical power lines.
Yeah, absolutely. So I could talk for a lot longer, but we are reaching the end of our show today. I have our ever popular 8 rapid fire questions I'd like to ask you, Pierre. Are you ready?
Yes,
All right. If you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
it would be my scalar energy tools, because they help me deal with not only stress, but assuming these electromagnetics will be around long term. So the frequency stuff, because we can do some cool things for the body.
Absolutely. Tell us something most people don't know about you.
I didn't do very well in undergraduate because I never took school seriously. I'm passionate about learning, but I realized I didn't take it seriously because they were wasting my time with a lot of what they taught me.
If I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
What a Wonderful World, Louis Armstrong.
Nice. What is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Occasional organic ice cream with some digestive enzymes. Yeah, if you're African American, you don't have, I think, the lipase enzyme. We naturally don't digest dairy very well.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. And ice cream can be delicious, but not when you have a stomachache afterwards. All right. What is the most influential book you've ever read?
Well, I would have to say two. First is the Bible, and then the second is Brian Richards, The FDA War on Your Health. He wrote it many years ago. Amazing book.
Interesting. Haven't heard of that one. I'll have to check it out. What does the word revolution mean to you?
I'd say it's actually living according to what you know you're calling to be and prioritizing pleasing your creator, not other human beings. I think you have to prioritize going alone sometimes and separating from the masses.
And what does the word remedy mean to you?
Anything here that was put here that's known to be beneficial for us. So from the plants, the flowers, all those different things, the herbs, the spices, and even the frequencies, those are all remedies.
And if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Please be aggressive about taking care of yourself and learning to educate yourself about how your body works because the powers that shouldn't be are very aggressive at stealing your health and making you sick. That's what I'd say.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. So, Pierre, if people would like to work with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, pierrepandre.com. That's the primary point of contact. You can find me on my Instagram, not underscore my underscore rest. Those are the main places people tend to reach out to me.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned an offer that you'd like to give to our listeners. Would you like to tell them about that?
Yeah. So these are two of my, as you can see, these vials, they have in scalar energy encoded citrine and rose, and it would be an option for people who book a session, whether it's a full session or 1 hour session. You'll get one of these for free and you'll have your electromagnetic situation addressed. And all you have to do is wear it. And it helps to reinforce the energy field so that the electromagnetics can't do what they're currently doing. And so that will be for the first three people. I'm willing to give away three of them.
Awesome. So run, don't walk. Go, go sign up for a session with Pierre. It has been
Mention the
such a
podcast. That's
Oh,
how I
absolutely. Absolutely. Mention the Remedy Revolution podcast when you make that appointment. And Pierre has those vials to offer you for your first appointment. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pierre. It has been a pleasure. Please, 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 all my listeners, reach out to Pierre, connect with him. I'd love to see him growing as well as the podcast growing. Like, share, subscribe, send this information to anybody who you think might listen to it. It really, truly is the only way that we can grow and share this information as widely as possible. And it is so important because, as Pierre mentioned, there are very aggressive forces working against us, and we need to match them and outdo them, which I know we will because we work with truth and energy and light. So thank you all for listening today. It has been a pleasure. Take care. We'll see you next time.